Hi clicker champs, you have got the hang of use context and our clicker game in our last video. But what if our game becomes even bigger with more features and more components? Managing state can get really tricky and out of control. And that's when the third-party libraries come in very handy. And today we'll be looking at how we can use the Redux with combination of Redux Toolkit to save our day. Now you might be wondering why we should move to Redux. First thing is that Redux helps you to centralize your state. Okay, so Redux puts all your state in one place like a giant white one can see and update the state. Imagine like a control room where you can monitor and control everything. Second reason is that you have a predictable state. Redux makes the state very predictable. You know exactly how the state changes and why, because all it is stored in one place. It's like having a map that shows every twist and turn clearly. Third reason, and that is the main, Redux comes with very powerful tools for debugging and tracking. Think of it like having a rewind button to see what went wrong and where as well. So before we jump into code and refactoring, let's spend a few seconds just to understand the principles of Redux. So Redux got three core principles. The first, it has one immutable store. Okay, an immutable store, I mean that your state can't just be changed directly. Okay, and having one immutable store helps with debugging and support server rendering and also make things easier to do and undo as well. In Redux, you have something called actions, okay, which help you to describe what the user intent is. And the third thing you have is reducers, which are functions that can help you to change your state in your store. So this is in short what are the Redux principles. Now let's refactor our code and learn how we can use Redux, the packages I need. So npm install add redux slash toolkit. And also I need to install React Redux. Let us install. That's install. Now next thing or next step is to create your Redux slice. And a slice in Redux Toolkit includes both your reducer logic and also the action all in one place. It's like Swiss Army for state management. Okay, so we will go here. We'll create a new folder and let's call it store, for example. And let's create a new file which calls score slice. So I'll say score, and you can call it anything you want. It's just a ways of naming and conventions. So I'll call it score slice.js. And inside score slice, basically, we need to define our init state and then create the slice and export it. So first thing we need to import create slice from Redux Toolkit. And then we need to create our initial state. Just zoom in to make text bigger. Close this as well and close that too. Okay. So we create our initial state. So const initial state. And our initial state, if you remember, if you go to our game context, we only have score at the moment because we have very simple app. So score, and also it starts from 0. So that's our initial state, okay, which will hold our state and also our reducers and actions too. So const score slice equal create slice. Okay, so we're creating our slice, and then the slice, you should give it a name, and you can name your app grow so it doesn't get messy. So I'm naming 4. Then I'm passing in my initial state. Okay, it should be like this. But because the namings of my property name and the variable are the same, so I can just do the shortcut, initial state. Then the third property we can pass is the reducers. Okay, so reducers like this, and it will be an object. Okay, so basically now inside your reducers here you can define all the actions you need to. Okay, so at the moment, because our game context, we have a few actions here. We have the increase, we have decrease, and we have reset as well. Okay, so I need three actions. So I'll go inside my reducer. I'll define my actions here. Call them anything you want, but I'll stick to meaningful names. So I'll say first one's increase method or action. And by default, they take your current state as an argument. Okay, so this is your current state of your store. And you can define and do whatever you want to do with action. I want for increase functionality, if you go back to our context, we are just increasing the score by one, right? So that's what I will do. I will say state dot score plus equal plus one. Okay, so basically I'm saying whatever my current score, add one to it and assign back to my state dot score. Okay, so this is a shortcut. Then my second method or my second action, it will be decrease. And again, we are passing the state, which is by default passing through our actions, which is your current state of your store. And again, I'll do state.score is minus equal 1. Okay, so basically, whatever my current, oh my God. So whatever my current state, I'm just reducing its score by 1. Okay, then the last one action we have is reset. And for reset, basically again, same thing. It takes this current state as an argument, which is your current store state. And all what we want to do is just reset your state to 0. So state.score equals 0. Nice. Okay, now your slice is defined. Next thing you want to do is that export your reducer. Export default score slice dot reducers. Sorry, dot reducer. Okay, and this because we're using the Redux Toolkit, it gives us this functionality, so we don't have to write a lot of code ourselves. It gives us these available for us within our create slice functionality. So whenever you create slice, you have access to reducers, and also you have access to actions. Okay, so we'll come here and we export them to export const. So we have increase, we have decrease, and we have reset. Okay, and we can say that's equal to score slice dot actions. Great. So this is amazing. So in one file, you can create your state, you can have your reducers, and you can have your actions as well, which really helps when you have bigger applications. Means your code is more manageable, easier to debug, easier to read as well. Okay. So if anyone new join it on your team later, they will not struggle just to understand your code and find the pieces here and there in your application. Okay. Now we have this one part is done. The next thing now is to create our store that we talked about. Okay, so we need to create one. So we will go here and I'll create a store. I'll call it store.js. Okay, and in the store.js we have to do a few things. First thing is that we need to import configure store from Redux Toolkit. Okay, so that is the first import. The second import is to import whatever reducers you created. Okay, so at the moment we just have one reducer inside the score reducer, so we'll import that. So import score reducer from score slice. Okay, now let's create our store. So const, I'll call it store equal configure store, and this store will be a function which accepts an object as argument, and The first property will be your reducer, and here you list all the reducers you create in your application later, okay? For example, you have users slice and maybe theme slice. So you have user reducer and you have also theme reducer as well. So whenever you create a reducer, you just have to import it in your store. So it's available to all your application. So reducer will be an object, and the first one I'll call it score. Okay, and you can call this anything you want as well. Let's just make sure something meaningful. Then I'll pass it to actual reducer and import it from my file. Great. Now my store is created. I need to export it. Export default store. Great, nice. So now I created my store. I created my slice. I linked my slice reducer to my store. Now I have to make this store available to my application, of course. So we go to our source project, which is app.js. And here before we were using this context, so we remove that. We don't need it anymore. And let's import a few things. So we'll import first the provider from React Redux. So provider from React Redux. It's almost same concept as context API, okay? Now, second thing, we need to import our store from the store we created. And next thing, now we have to go and wrap our application. So instead of wrapping with this game provider we did before, I'll just do provider. Provider, okay? And it will accept one property, which calls store. And I'll assign to it the store I created. Okay, great. So good so far. So creates our store, we link it to our app, we create our slice to go and actually fix our components. So first to remove this context, I don't need it anymore. Okay, next thing we need to go and refactor. Okay, so let's go first to the game, okay, which we're actually doing actions there and see how we can use our Redux there. Okay, so in our game, first I'll remove this. I don't need it anymore. I don't need also the use context. And to import a few things. So import use dispatch from Redux. Also, we need something called use selector. Okay, so use dispatch will help us, like here we did, to dispatch our actions. Okay, and use selector will need to access the values in our state. Let's import few packages. The first one is a hook called use dispatch, okay, that we will import from React Redux. And that hook we needed to wrap it around our actions that we create in score slice to call them within our functional component. Because those functions we create in the score slice, we can't just call them immediately. We need to wrap them within this hook, okay? Now, the other thing we need to import is called use selector, okay, which is also a hook from React Redux, and it will help us access the state within our Redux store, okay. So I'll save this. Now I'll come here, I'll remove this here, and first I'll create an instance of my dispatch equal use dispatch. Okay, and then I'll go back up here and I need to import the actions that I need. Okay, so import decrease, okay, from the store score slice we create. Also I need to import increase and also reset. Now easily I can just go here, okay, and lucky for us, because the same instance name I have now created, same the one we had before, I don't need to do much. But what I'll go inside here before we trigger the action using actually with a type, now I can just go and say decrease, okay, and then I can come inside here. I'll just remove this, I'll say decrease, and then I can come inside here, I'll just say reset. So if you notice something now, first thing when we are doing this is just it helps us first with having a reusable functionality, okay? And for example, as I had so many components that I have to go and change one functionality in it for one action, I have to go manually to each and every one, make sure the type is correct, means the spelling is correct, and the payload is right, and everything is correct. But when you do this type of actions using Redux, you don't have to worry about what actually that function does. Okay, you just import the action, the function name, and import it. So I'll just go correct this one here. Is no, here is increase, and that's it basically. Now, when we come to the score state here, we need to access it. So the way we can do it, we do const and define my variable name. I'll call it also score, and it will be use selector. And this selector by default have access to your current Redux state within this slice. Okay, so state, and then state dot score, which is the top reducer level that we created here in the reducer, so this score. Okay, then if you remember, initial state had a state called score2, so dot score. Great, and then I'll pass this one to my UI, remove the state dot score and paste this one. Now, same thing we have to do also in the leaderboard. We don't have context API anymore, okay, or use context hook, so I have to remove those. And we have to import here, because we are only reading, so we don't need any dispatching, we just need use selector, okay, from React Redux. And then I'll come here, I'll say const score equal use selector, and the use selector have access to your current Redux state, and I'll say state dot score dot score. Okay, and then I'll come right here, and all what I need is just score. Let's save this. And I just see a few things here that still complaining. Let me remove this one from here as well. And there we go, it's happy. The initial state is coming correct. We can see here 0 and 0, which means our initial app is working as expected. It's not crashing, which is great. Now we go and test increase, and see my increase is not working. I think I know why. So inside here, when we dispatches our actions, actually I have to call them as an action. Okay, so I have to add the parentheses here. Let's save this. Let's go back to our UI. Let's hard refresh, and let's try again. Increase, and there we go. You can see my scores are increasing, decrease, and also if I do decrease and then reset, that's good. That's working as expected. Now, one more cool thing I will show you. Okay. One of the reasons when you're using the Redux state management, it helps you to track your actions, okay? So if you have context API, for example, or just reducers, you don't know really what triggered the state change, okay? It's not easy to track, therefore it's not easy to debug as well. But when you are using Redux, you have a dev tool that you can install, so Redux DevTools. And you can add extension to your Chrome. So just go there and say add to Chrome, add extension, and now let it get added to my browser. There we go. Now I will go here, and I might have to rerun my browser again. Now I will go right click, inspect, and I should see a new tab here called Redux. Okay, there we go. Now you have two panels. The left one, it tracks your actions, okay, whatever actions you're triggering, and on the right you can do different things. You can see your actual state, the difference between the previous state and the current state after action trigger. So let's try this to not get too much wordy. I'll click the first one, which is called increase score, and you can see as I do that, on my left I can see the list of actions being triggered. So the one that has been triggered is score/increase. Okay, and on the right I have different selected, so I can see what happened. So what we did, the score in our state, we change it from 0 to 1. Good. Now I'll click again, I click second one, there we go, we change our score state from 1 to 2. Okay, if I go click reset, there we go, the action we trigger is score/reset, and what it did, it changed my score state from 2 to 0. So that's what I meant when I said when you're using Redux, it's easy to track your state changes, because you can track your actions, which actions being triggered and what those actions really did behind the scene. Now let's see how we can add an async call, okay, using the Redux Toolkit. So it will be a little bit different. It's not the same as we did before here. okay, but is very simple and very easy as well. So Redux Toolkit give us a provider ready for us to use, which handle async operations. And also the amazing thing about it, by default, it handles for us the loading, the success, and the error states within our slice as well. So we don't have to write extra code to manage those states. Now, let's get started. First, we need to import, create Async Thunk, okay, from Redux Toolkit. Then we come outside of create slide and we'll create a new function, should be our action, okay, const, and we'll export it as well. Export const and call your action anything you want. So I don't have an API, but I'll just simulate one and I will call it, for example, fetch higher score. Let's say you have some APIs and you want to fetch some higher score for another user, for example. I don't know. So we can do equal, then create async thunk. Okay, create async thunk. As you can see here, it accepts few arguments. The first one, it is your action name, okay, or the path of your action. If you remember here before, when we built in this one here, increase, decrease, which are our actions, we didn't have to add any name from them. Reason why, if I go to inspect again, I'll show you what I mean, Redux. And you see this score slash increase, that is, for example, the name of our action, okay, or the path for our action. If I click reset, that's score slash reset, okay? So score is whatever reducer we called here, slash, and then your action name. So when we use create async thunk, because outside our slice function, we have to give it a name by ourselves, okay? So it's like you're hard coding it. So we have to do score, okay, slash, and then higher score, okay? You can call anything you want, but just make sure you're consistent, right? If your other actions and the file are, for example, score slash, make sure it's starting with score slash, then whatever your method definition or naming you want to give, okay? So that's the first argument. The second argument will be a function, and it will be a sync function because we want to have a sync call. And there basically you can manage whatever API thing you want to do, okay? For example, I'll just hard code this, which doesn't exist. So import, so I'm using Axios, which means I have to import Axios from Axios, and I need to install it as well. And I have to go to my terminal npm install Axios. This is installed. Anyway, this one will not work because this API is not a real API, okay? It's just dummy want to show you how this works. Now, we defined our action that will be async function action, which will be async action for us. Now, how we can use this to update the state? Okay, now we created our thunk. How we can connect this one to our reducer? So we can go back to our create slice, and we will not go inside the reducer, but next to it, and we will add a new property called extra reducers. Okay, and this by default accepts a property which is a builder, which help you add more reducers and more functionality to your reducer. So let's call it builder. That's property. And then inside, we can do a lot of things, okay? For example, I can have access to the life cycle of my thunk call or my API call, okay? So all what I can do is that builder.add class, then that is your function that you defined right there, okay? So fetch high score, then I want the life cycle of pending, okay? So when you use extra reducers to create a thunk, you can have access to whole life cycle of your API, okay? Without having really to go and manually handle it by yourself. So you have this status here. So pending, which it just started, fulfilled, which is finished, rejected when an error happened after your API call is completed. Okay, so I'll just first remove this to fix that. So what we're saying is that I want to add a reducer to my builder, which is when it's pending, I want to change some status in my state to loading. Okay, which means I have to go back here, my initial state, okay, and to pick up this status here and change it to loading. Great. The next thing I'm doing is that when my API is successful, so fetch highscore.fulfilled, then change my status to succeeded, okay, and pass whatever payload I get from the API back and store it in my high score state, okay, so store it right there. Then I'm saying if it got rejected, means an error happened, then update my status to failed, okay? And also update my error state to whatever error message I'm getting back from my API. Nice. Now, next thing you'll be wondering is how I can access then this or trigger it from my component. Very easy, as we did for actions almost. We're going to import our comma fetch higher score. Okay, and let's say for example you have some button to retrieve the higher score. Okay, so let's create a button as I get higher score. We'll give it an arrow function. Okay, and we'll wrap our action of course with a dispatch. So dispatch, then our thunk that we created. Now let's go back to our UI. Let's hard refresh and let's check our get higher score. So we click it. Okay, and there we go. So you can see here the live cycle of your API call. So first you have pending, okay, and if you click it, it shows what it does for us. So if you go to difference, it changed the state of the score status, okay, from idle to loading. And that's what we have done right here in our score slice, okay. So we changed our status from idle to loading, okay. Now, because the API doesn't really exist, so of course it was failed. So the next action being triggered, it was the fetch high score slash rejected, okay? And to change the status of our status from loading to failed, and also passed an error, network error, to our error state. Now let's talk about performance. As this demo is very simple one, what I have done is I just add few other components just to show you some basic performance difference when you're using, for example, Redux Tool comparing to a context API. And from here you can imagine what's going to happen to real-time big applications. So what I have done, I created two other parent components, parent A, okay, and this parent A doesn't access your Redux store at all, and it have child A, which also doesn't access your Redux store, and then the child A have a grandchild A, which really that's the one which access your state. I want to display it in the UI, okay. Then that is parent A. So you can see parent A have child and grandchild, which is really accessing the data in your store. Now, if I close these, we go to parent B. So parent B, we have it. It doesn't have any child component, but that parent B itself access your Redux store. So when we use context API, for example, and your store changes, it updates. That means all these components here will re-render. That means even parent A, it doesn't need anything from your Redux store, it will re-render. And also it means your child A, which doesn't need anything from your store as well, will also re-render. Okay, so that's something that will affect your performance if you use context API. But when you're using Redux store, okay, only the component which interact with your Redux directly will be re-rendered if the elements they're reading have changed, okay? Which means, for example, I'm expecting if my score game have changed, I don't want my parent A to re-enter behind the scene. Neither I don't want also the child A to render behind the scene because they are not accessing anything from my Redux store. But my grandchild A, if only the score value have changed, then it should be re-rendered, okay? If something else also in my state, for example, the status or anything like that, it changed, it should not impact also my grandchild A component. And this is amazing, and that is the big thing that the Redux store give us, okay? Now let's demo this in the UI, okay? So I'll go back to my UI. And what I will do, I will just what I will do is just refresh my screen. Okay, so you can see here you have score 0, then your grandchild A is rendering with 0, then the parent B with 0. Okay, so I'm expecting, for example, increase, everything is changing as expected, increase, it's working fine. Okay, and you can see your action increase here is triggering. Now, where is the performance? Now, what I will do, I'll go to not recorder, but actually because it's a new tab, new window I'm using, I need to install React DevTools. I'll just add it to my Chrome here, add extension. There we go, now it's added. Now I'll just refresh and as if showing. It's not showing. I have to restart my browser. Okay, now I'll restart my browser. I go to Profiler, okay, and this profile basically help you to profile the performance application. I'll just go here and make sure I highlight every updates having my component. It's helped me with debugging, and also I will go to component. I'll make sure I record why each component had rendered, okay. So it gives me explanation why every component rendered behind the screen. Now I'll click the record icon here, then I'll go and click increase score. Okay, and then I'll stop recording. And this one basically will tell me which component ran behind the scenes. So you can see the game component, which we have all our interaction. That of course will render because hook number 5 has changed because we're changing the Redux state. Okay, then we're reading that property. Then leaderboard, which was showing exactly the score, we're just reading the score, also rendered. And reason why, because the state has changed, okay, which makes sense. You can see here the parents A did not rendered, okay, which is great, okay, that's what I'm expecting. Also, behind the scene, the child also didn't render, but only my grandchild rendered, okay? And big performance improvement, okay. Now, if you go to parent B, because that one access directly your state, so of course that one you end the screen, okay. So I hope this makes sense to you and it's add up why Redux also one of the main state management and the best one out there you should be using for your application.